Welcome. On behalf of the National Catholic Educational Association, thank you for joining us for this professional development opportunity. My name is Laura MacDonald, and I am the Vice President of Content at the National Catholic Educational Association, and I will be the facilitator for today's webinar, Unlocking Enrollment Success. Just a few housekeeping notes as people are joining. We are recording this session today, which means you will be able to share it with others and watch it again by going to our website and clicking on PD, probably by tomorrow. At the end of this session, I will share a link to the online survey in the chat and instructions on how you can receive a certificate of completion for the webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A window. We will monitor as questions come in and try to answer them in an allotted time, as well as save some time at the end. So you can go ahead and try that Q&A window now. You can introduce yourself and tell us your school and city if you would like. As you do, I will tell you a little bit about myself before I introduce the rest of the panel. I began education over 25 years ago, and as an educator and administrator, working as a teacher and as a principal, and at the district and county and state levels with students, teachers, and administrators. But I'm most particularly proud that my husband and I had been able to provide a Catholic education for our two daughters from kindergarten through college. I know the difference a Catholic school can make in families, and it all begins with what we're talking about here today, enrollment. So joining me today are Rebecca Mendoza. She is the Senior Director of Demand Marketing and Strategy for Education Solutions by Community Brands. Rebecca has over 15 years of experience in demand generation marketing with time spent in aerospace and defense, biotech, and most recently, supply chain logistics software services, giving her a robust foundation to draw from when enabling and executing demand, adoption, and retention strategies. She has a joy of experiencing parenthood firsthand and is preparing for her daughter's last year of high school and her son's first year in the new school year. And she is intimately familiar with ways schools communicate with their families and communities from that perspective. She is highly engaged in creating collaborative communications between school and families through solutions that deliver outstanding experiences across the board. And then next we have Jennifer Swenson. And Jennifer is at A. Mary of Lourdes Catholic School Principal in Little Falls, Minnesota. She earned her Bachelor's of Science degree in elementary education, and she has a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. And Jennifer has taught both primary and intermediate grade levels for 12 years before she became a principal. Her husband, Nick, and her have been married for 15 years, and God has blessed them with two sons, Landon and Lucas. Landon entering 7th grade and Lucas in 4th grade at Mary of Lourdes Elementary School and Mary of Lourdes Middle School. And last but certainly not least, we have Shauna. She's the Associate Manager of Product Marketing for Education Solutions by Community Brands. And before this position, she was the Director of Enrollment and Financial Aid for multiple schools in the greater Seattle area. She has more than a decade of experience and thorough understanding of enrollment and marketing strategy in both independent and our parochial schools. And whether Enrollment Director of Education Technology, product marketer, she strives to make schools and the tools they use function at the highest level possible while delivering an exemplary family experience. Boy, we have so much experience. I'm taking too long. So I would love to see if anybody left us a message there and are using the Q&A before we get started. And we do have a couple people that decided to say hello. We have Allison and Cheryl. Thank you. Thank you for joining us here today. So let me see here. Let's get started. And let's see. Throughout our webinar, we will address top questions about enrollment. So welcome to you all. But before we begin, we can't forget what's very important to us here in our Catholic schools, prayer. So please join me in prayer in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, we thank you for all you have given us in our lives. Bless all the past, present, and future students, staff, and administration for our Catholic schools. Keep us always focused on following Jesus Christ in our lives and living the gospel message every day. We thank our parents, benefactors, and alumni who support the work of our schools. We ask that you bless them in their generosity so that through their continued support, we will continue our work, placing our Catholic faith at the foundation of all that we do. We pray to be the light and the hope for our students, community, and the nation for generations to come. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And now we begin. And the first question, if Shauna, if you will start us off, I see the first question here is, how do you increase enrollment?
Oh boy, that is a big question. From my perspective, just in the role of a former enrollment director, and in my experience, there are multiple ways to increase enrollment. But I think one of the best ways to increase enrollment is to get your community involved, and just making sure that everybody in your community understands that they are a part of the marketing and admission office at your school. I know at the schools that I worked at the highest, 98% of our kids came from word of mouth. And so just making sure that your community is happy and healthy goes a long way in increasing enrollment.
Thank you.
So for my school, what we're really focusing on and what I found is to have a clear vision to ensure that the families know what your school is all about. Our school right now, we're really amping up on our Catholic identity. We want to make sure that when people are looking at Mary of Lourdes, they're understanding that this is a Catholic school and we are here to build disciples. So when you're looking at increasing that enrollment, what is your clear vision? What is special about your school, and why does somebody want to come to your school versus somewhere else?
It's really
you mentioned that, I also think of little things like just making sure your style guide at your school and your branding and your colors are on point. I've gone to some schools where, they change it a little bit every year and new colors. And this year it's this color blue, next year it's the next color blue. And what you really want is when your students are out in that community wearing their t-shirts, and our Catholic school students do usually wear their t-shirts on the weekend. They take so much pride in their school. And so knowing from across the grocery store or across the campus when they look in and see that same color, even if they can't see the logo, it says, oh, I know where that student goes to school. And so people are constantly seeing that. It's free advertising, and also even just your campus, making sure the lawn's cut, and all those first impressions, they can only go so far, right? You can have a great lawn and a terrible school culture, and it's not going to go very far. But those first impressions are so very important in our schools when we're trying to increase enrollment.
Yeah, I mean, just from like a higher level sort of standpoint, with my marketing hat here, and we're really thinking about like all of these wonderful things that the panel have just said, like to action against that. It's really like, what is the story that you want to tell as like an engagement point, really to get out in front of like new families, but more importantly in your community as you're strengthening those community ties. And a really great way to be doing that is just, as our panelists have said, making sure your brand recognition is on point. Do we have our newsletter set up? Are we putting bright glossy photos of our kids in our school t-shirts like in those newsletters? Are we circulating things, in the community through different community boards and opportunities like that? So just overall, the more eyes on, the more folks you'll get engaged. And there's a ton of different ways to do that. But I think all of the points that our panelists have said so far are really just the great stepping stones to begin to increase that enrollment, and really more importantly, that engagement, right? We just want to increase that engagement. So we're getting folks who want to come on campus, who are excited to come on campus.
And Rebecca, don't you find too, I can remember back when my own children were babies and I was starting to look for even a preschool. I don't know why, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I can remember going to a website and not being impressed with the way it looks and going on to the next school on the list. And, and that doesn't have a lot to do with the school always, but for me, it was again that website was things weren't in order or things were outdated. And I was thinking, oh, they don't stay on top of things. Or so even just, those sorts of things, the marketing, the social media is very important.
Yeah, I mean, we have some recent statistics from Statista that pulled from a big government report that was just done based on how different generations are consuming social media. So across the board, what we found is that your millennials, your Gen Xers, and the upcoming Gen Z parents, they're all looking on LinkedIn as like their big source of like social proofing. Like, are you a real school? Do you do things the way that you say you do things? Are your staff well educated? They are all looking at and engaging with LinkedIn, kind of our boomers who are kind of, less and less in that new parent group of like maybe people coming in. They're on Facebook. So like these channels, these social media channels and platforms, they're really important to your point, kind of talking about the website. But more importantly, we find that these parent age groups, this demographic, they're really using LinkedIn, Instagram to like validate, are you who you say you are? Are you walking your mission? Are you talking that mission? So just as important as your campus, as your branding being consistent, we want to make sure that those areas are consistent too. And these are all ways, again, it's like awareness, increasing enrollment is all about that awareness and driving your mission forward for your school, whatever that may be.
Great. So if we go to that next slide, that's a great lead in. What messages should we be focusing on during enrollment season? Jennifer, do you want to start us out on this one?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank
So
you.
the majority of my teaching has been in Catholic schools because I absolutely love Catholic education. I truly wholeheartedly believe in it. I stepped out for a few years after moving and I thought I'd try the public sector, and I just realized it wasn't for me because God was calling me back to the Catholic school. And what I really found is there's just some misconceptions out there that aren't always spoken. A lot of times they're out there and people just don't like to come to the school and ask them. So during this enrollment season, I think it's really important to find out what are some of the misconceptions that are about your school, specifically Catholic schools. I've heard so many people say, well, you're a Catholic school. You don't need to follow the laws. You don't need to follow rules and regulations. And that's just absolutely not true. I haven't been in a school that hasn't followed standards, whether it's the state standards or some of them look at some of the Common Core standards, just your state by state or even your Catholic school, like Lumen standards for an accreditation association that you're in. So just making sure that the families are aware of this, that yes, we're Catholic schools, but we still are, if you're accredited, just getting that out there saying we are accredited, that means that we do follow these rules and standards. We are going to deliver education that is equal to, if not better than the public education system. But we're also going to bring that faith in. The reason you're coming to the Catholic school is because we are building disciples. We are here to make these little kids get ready to go to heaven. That's what our goal is. And so just helping with that, if you work with your public school and offer services like special ed services, or if you have title funding, things like that, let the families know that, yes, you also have those options available to you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that in my experience, when we think about the messaging that we want to be giving to our prospective families, it's important that we really focus on our strong mission, our values, even our community, how the strength of our community, and talking about who we are as a community. And that includes everyone from the students, faculty and staff, parents, alumni, just who's in our community and how strong the community is. If there are any things that you do, particularly at your school, to connect your community, bring those things in. Also talking about our academic program, right? I mean, definitely when we look at schools, private Catholic schools are always set apart from public schools. And one of the things that sets them apart is the strong academic program. So always be bringing in that message about the strength of the academic program. And then not last, and certainly not least, I think affording a Catholic school education for some folks and some prospective families, just the cost of tuition may be a barrier to entering into a Catholic school. And so I think that it's important for us to talk about that elephant that's in the room. There is a cost, of course, to go into a Catholic school, but talk about how families can afford. I know in my time, we did specific marketing campaigns around financial aid and, made it not a subject that people shied away from, but a subject that we wanted to talk about. And we turned the conversation more from financial aid to affordability. Just using the different language there made a huge difference. And then lastly, in Seattle, where I'm from, Catholic school, we have lots of Catholic schools throughout the city. So we're all vying for the same applicants. And our city isn't particularly Catholic. So one thing we would like to say in our city is we educate because we're Catholic, not because you're Catholic. So we encourage families of different faiths to apply to our school. What really ended up mattering at the end of the day was the values, right? And our mission. So do your values line up with our Catholic values? The mission that you set out for your child's education, does that line up with our mission? And for a lot of times, we could see parents' eyes open up when we started talking in those terms, right? It's not about you being Catholic, it's about us being Catholic, but about us bringing our message, our value, our missions to our community. And a lot of times they could get on board with that. So just my perspective.
I love that, especially with the mission. As a former school administrator, one year I started off the school year with my staff and I asked them, what is your elevator speech? You have 30 seconds or a minute, and somebody asks you about the school. What do you tell them? And that is not a rare thing that happens, especially in our small Catholic schools where a lot of times the teachers or parents at the school and they're part of the community that they serve. That does happen. And so parents will go to them first. I know you teach at the school, tell me about it. And so hearing what their messages were really eye-opening to me, because some of them weren't in line with our mission. Some of them talked about the culture. And if your mission is not strong and does not align with that culture, the message that they're sharing might not be the one that you want them to share, and they might not even be aware of it. So having a similar message, having that elevator speech, and then asking your staff. So it's actually really great feedback and data for you moving forward on what are the areas you need to strengthen. So that was one piece that was really powerful, working with my staff. And and the other is something that I was really selfish with, but on purpose, was I gave the school tours to my parents, my prospective parents. Yes, other people on my staff could do it, but unless I was sick or not at school, I did those. And the first question I ended up asking, it took me a few years to come up with this, and it's not rocket science. Many of you may ask it, but the best question that worked for me was, why are you here? I asked that very first name, ask them their names, ask the family. And then I said, why are you here? Because their answer to me, one, was feedback. But two, it told me what direction to go in when I was speaking to them. We could talk about our schools for hours. We love our schools, but we want to talk about the right things and not overwhelm our parents. So, someone that maybe isn't there for the faith might say, I'm here for the values. And so then I can go forward during that tour and emphasize those areas. Or they might even say, I'm here for the athletics, which okay, but then I could talk about the basketball program or things like that they were interested in. And by the way, making sure they learned about, the Catholicity, because evangelization starts that day. And so it was a really helpful question to ask. And I was able to go, oh, people are coming because they're hearing about this. They don't know about this. And that's my third point, and I'll leave it at that, is social media page, which is free advertising, by the way. We don't have to spend a lot on, on advertising, but it's a good thing when we can. And, on that social media page, you don't have to show parents and emphasize extraordinary things. They don't know what happens day to day during the hours of school start and school ends. They know about our functions and they know about our events, but they don't see the good things happening in the classroom. So you don't have to do extraordinary things. Taking a picture of the science project in the classroom, taking a picture when the kids are dressing up doing their speeches. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes that our parents don't know about and our prospective families don't know about. And they see those things if you keep a regular social media page, and they are impressed and they think the school is extraordinary for all these great things that a lot of us do. But just by showing them, because out of sight, out of mind, the good things going on in your school is great advertising. All right, are we ready to move on? So this next one, scan the QR code. And my friends, I tell you, if you have your phone out, we're encouraging to use it right now. Scan that first QR code. And the first person that scans it will win a gift card on behalf of Education Solutions and our team at Community Brands. So good luck. And by the way, there'll be another opportunity. So keep your phone close, but stay off of it. All right, moving on. You can see the next question there is for Shauna, if you want to start us out on the biggest challenges for schools during enrollment season.
Oh my gosh. As we all know, I mean, some of us are probably still in enrollment season, even though school has wrapped up, because we are trying to get those last minute seats filled. So we face a lot of challenges. And I will just give a couple that I know always stuck out for me as an enrollment director. Our first, I mean, in no particular order, the change in demographics in our community, right? So there may be, a smaller birth rate, or there are less children around, just period. Or the zip codes may shift and look a little different. So I know in Seattle, we have a shrinking children population in the Seattle area, just because of all the big business, the Amazons, the Starbucks, the Costcos. And so all of our families are moving out to the suburbs. And so we have a real shift in our demographics, and you see it from public school through private school, right? Those kindergarten rates are dropping drastically in our area. So anytime there's a change in demographics, that always affects our enrollment, right? And then the other things, competition from other schools. Like I said before, we have a lot of Catholic schools in my area that are preschool through 8th grade or 9th through 12th grade. We are just saturated with schools and competition. And increasingly, we have more and more competition from the independent schools and the charter schools that are also in our area. So just facing those challenges as well. And we're all vying again for those same applicants. So just, running up against a lot of competition, and all the schools in your area can be great schools, right? So there's lots of choice for our parents in our area. So always competition from other schools. And then there's the challenge of affordability. I kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, and just making sure that families have access to the education that we offer. And tuition sometimes is a barrier. So just, keeping our financial aid programs robust as we can. offering it to as many students as we can. So that was always a challenge that we face. And then retention, of course, was also a challenge that we face during our enrollment season. Enrollment is not just about enrolling new students, it's also about retaining and re-enrolling current students. So we were always thinking about, okay, what is that going to look like for us? Do we need to have a retention or re-enrollment committee established? At my schools, we always had re-enrollment retention committees, just to make sure that we had the maximum number of families re-enrolling. And you guys all know, as you're going through that re-enrollment process, before you start offering to new students, it's always a struggle, just making sure and chasing down those families who haven't completed their re-enrollment. So re-enrollment, retention, affordability for sure, the changing demographics in your area, definitely all challenges that I've seen come up.
I would have to say yes, yes, and yes to all of them. But like specifically from a Catholic school, in addition to all of those, is that there are just less families attending Mass. If we look at the rate of active Catholic families that are participating, unfortunately, it's dropping. That's just the reality we live in. And Monsignor Shea wrote an amazing book called From Christendom to Apostolic Mission, and it just talks about that and the struggles with that and how that is tied into schools. And so that is a really big struggle for us. I was at a school that we used to be able to look at the rate of baptisms and be able to take the rate of baptisms, and then that would help us project incoming kindergartners. And that's not something we can really rely on anymore. So looking at other ways of how can we get these families into our schools. And then you had mentioned tuition because, a lot of times that is that elephant in the room. And who offer scholarships, talk about that. Who can apply for the scholarships? What can you do to get that financial aid? Sometimes administrators, we need to be creative in our funding and where we can pull different funds from. And so I think that's just a really big challenge that we are seeing in our Catholic schools around the country.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, like we hear these challenges, but I mean, I think they're wonderful opportunities. Just a question ago, we were talking about messaging and like what are the messages that like are really important to help like boost your enrollment, but not only enrollment, retention, right? We want new families, we want our current families to come back, we want them to bring their siblings, all of these great things. So as you're thinking about that messaging and you're thinking about the challenges that you're facing, those two things don't have to be separated. They really are like a hand-in-hand opportunity to kind of refine that messaging to tackle those challenges head on. So, if financial aid is like a big conversation in your community, I would really encourage, you to have a stream of content that is condensed, easy to understand, easy for your different parent groups to read and get through, and tackle that challenge head on with like this very tailored, specific messaging. And whether you're doing that through, a blog post on your website, or you're publishing it through a newsletter, or you're tapping into your alumni to like, hey, let's get a vlog out, or like, let's do like a fun, day in the life of sort of piece of content to really tackle these issues that we have and these challenges that we have. These are really quick and easy ways to overcome the obstacles, but more importantly, to show your engagement and how much you value your community. and how much you want to be a part of these dialogues and discussions. So, there's lots of tools that you can use to do that, whether you are choosing from, the admissions office to do email campaigns, right, with any number of email campaign tools, or whether you are getting really heavily involved on social media. Don't forget, your parents are on LinkedIn. So you want to utilize that channel, want eyes on, right? Or maybe you want to, we'll say, go old school with it, and you have, at your church, you're able to print flyers, or there's a community board, and so you can get that open house up there, and you can get, your financial aid office to do a webinar similar to this, or just hey, we're going to do open office hours. Come by. You don't have to be a current family that's enrolled with us. If you have questions, come by, come talk to us. And you've got that stuck up on a community bulletin board. These are all really great ways that I think schools can take advantage of, not being afraid to get ahead of those challenges and answer those questions. So overall, I think really great talking points, really interesting challenges that we all face, but hopefully some takeaways on how to get ahead of that and get out in front of it and really have those open communications and dialogues with your community.
And I think community is such a key here. Knowing your community and their needs, that reciprocal relationship, inviting people in, and and you also mentioned retention, and happy families, happy students bring friends and families. They want to share. They want their friends in their classrooms. We used to let the Cub Scouts use our facility, and we got several new Cub Scouts that ended up coming to our school because they saw the things going on, or they had friends, or the club softball team that used our field because we had a field, and they were so grateful for being able to have a field to practice on, and then several of the students ended up in our classrooms. So and we also have to remember, we can't just welcome people in. If you're welcoming people in, you have to be prepared for who they are. And so knowing the people in your community that you're serving, hoping that your school looks like the community you're serving, and making sure that if it doesn't, you're doing things to make sure that you are not just hoping they enroll, but being prepared for your guests and doing the things in the community they need to be successful at your school. Because we can welcome people in, but they're not going to stay if we're not prepared to serve them in the things they need. We see this, one of the trends here we're seeing is, this is from last year, the data that we collected nationally at NCEA, and we can see that 21% of all students in our Catholic schools in the country are reporting to be non-Catholic. And so I prefer to just say of other faiths or other affiliations, or no affiliation at all. And so how do we make students that maybe aren't Catholic feel welcome? I can remember going to a church and not knowing the procedures or how things worked, and feeling really uncomfortable, and just stepping across that threshold to was a step. So how do we make the community feel comfortable on our campus, whatever those trends are, and whoever we're serving? In this case, we need to make sure that we're willing to offer not only just students of other faith, families of other faith, help them to support their children, and also our faculty. We're at 16% of our faculty are reported to need support in the area of Catholic schools. So what do we have in place to make sure that they are going to be successful once they do arrive to our campus? So our next question, what are retention? We kind of talked about a few of them already. What are some of the trends for schools during enrollment seasons? Becca, do you want to start us off on this one?
Yeah, I mean, a great thing that we're seeing for trends is really tapping back into that community that you have in your school. So, your parents, they're a great way to get, first of all, social proofing, word of mouth, right? My kid goes to this school and we love it because X, Y, and Z things. Like you cannot pay enough money to get that kind of like good news and like free advertising and consistent messaging out, right? To like get parents to come back, to be excited. More importantly, your alumni, like what are they doing now? What did this education set them up to do? Give them success and the right tools for later in life. Another great group to tap into when you, again, we're going to keep tying it back. We're going to talk about like that consistent messaging, tackling those challenges, you know, with re-enrollment. Like, let's talk about financially. Let's talk about like how parents who like maybe had one child in school and okay, we're doing it, we're great, but guess what? Next year, little Susie's brother is going to come to school, and that's a tougher conversation that we have to have, right? So like really tailoring that messaging, being open and available for your communities, and kind of really driving the wonderful work that your school is already doing, but we just highlighting it in a way that's very digestible so that parents are aware. I think that's what we're hearing across the board from panelists. Like it's just mostly making parents aware of like the fantastic things that their children are doing on the day-to-day, the opportunities that they have. So like as we're thinking about just maybe overall messaging and communication strategy to help boost retention and like really look in these trends, like are you highlighting, you know, the science fair, your athletics? Do you have an award-winning arts program? Like, are those things regularly making them into the newsletters, into your social media feeds? Are we doing Spotlight a Senior, you know, as a way to get like our kindergarten parents excited and say like, I want my senior to like be a spotlight someday. And so like we're getting that engagement, that excitement that really boosts, you know, like overall adoption, but really it's retention, right? You want your folks coming back. You want them to be happy and excited about the mission, the education, your faculty. Another great way to help boost retention is like spotlight on a faculty member. Maybe you're sending out a great email communication about, you know, your 8th grade teacher who like graduated from, you know, a great institution and has led all of these wonderful development talks, you know, link it to their LinkedIn page, but a hyperlink there, you know, validate these things, social proof these things. Really, these are all wonderful ways that we can connect and really help boost our retention. And we're seeing, you know, the trending to be the more tailored our messages are to our parents and our communities, the higher that conversion rate is for when they re-enroll. So it's really just about meeting our parents where they are and understanding what they want to see. And, you know, parents always want to see their kids. So any campaigns you can get out and around that, so parents could be like, ooh, is little Johnny going to be sponsored today or highlighted today? Those work wonders. So that's kind of, you know, at least from a high level, some great ideas to help like boost retention. But I'm sure the panelists have really wonderful things that they have done in their roles that they want to share.
Well, I will say that, you know, there were a few, 2 or 3 things that we did every single year, and they started as a trend, but became an actual thing at our schools, right? So one, I think I talked a little bit before about forming that retention committee and just being really intentional about making sure that the experience that the kiddos and the families were having were the best experience that they could have, because that will be a gauge on whether or not, you know, they will return, right? So just really looking at, you know, how kids are doing in the academic program, what the culture of the school looks like, how strong is the community, and really focusing on all of those little things that will make a family re-enroll, right? So that's one thing that we always had at our schools. And then another thing was just really getting in there early and often with the kiddos to talk about the next grade level, what that would look like. A lot of times we would lose our kiddos from our primary school to our middle school. So we would be talking with those 4th and 5th graders really intentionally and building in some things in those couple of years to really get them to be thinking about and seeing themselves in the next part of the school, in the middle school, right? So exposing them to some of the activities that the middle school had going on. or hooking up our parents from middle school and the lower school, putting them together so that they could be asking their questions and getting their questions answered, but just really always thinking about, okay, what's next for them? For our little kindergartners, we lost kiddos at first grade because you can do, or pre-K, you could do pre-K and have to pay for pre-K in any city, and then you could go to kindergarten for free. So we would lose a bunch of kids at kindergarten, right? So we'd be having our parents that were in kindergarten, matching them up with our parents who are in pre-K, or just doing special events for our pre-K kiddos, exposing them to the elementary school so that they could see themselves being a part of that and showing them some things. If you don't come to third grade at X school, you may miss out on this experience. So really just early and often exposing those younger kiddos to the next level of school. So we had our retention committees, we would expose our kiddos early to the next level. And then always just communicating with our parents. We were in constant communication with them. And if that meant from newsletters to surveys, always judging and gathering data around their experiences as parents, because we know that if parents aren't happy, the odds of them exiting the school are higher, right? So we were always just wondering, what is your experience? How satisfied are you with the academic program? How satisfied are you with the leadership? How satisfied are you with, just the community as a whole? What are things we can do to increase your satisfaction? Just always asking them, how are you doing? How is this going? What can we do just to make things better? Because retention, the biggest part of retention is making sure that they feel comfortable, they feel welcome, they feel engaged, and they're happy with their experience.
So what I've found when you're talking about certain grade levels and having students leave, we found a lot of times it had to do with sacraments. So being in a Catholic school, second grade is a great big grade for sacraments, first reconciliation, first Holy Eucharist. And then at that, between second and third grade, we would see them drop off because they had received their sacraments. So what's special about third grade? Why do you want to keep coming? Why stay here? What's so great about us? So kind of when Laura was talking about making sure that the staff has elevator speeches, what message can we relay to parents over and over and over again so that even those parents have some sort of an elevator speech so they can quickly say, well, we choose to keep our child at X school because of, and then these 3 reasons. Just having that clear vision for your school, and then the parents are even able to relay that message. I think it's super important that the pastor of your parish is also on board. It is just super important to make sure that if you are part of like an area Catholic community, or if you have a chaplain in your school, that the pastor is also relaying that same message and on the same page as the administration and the staff, because that pastor is acting in in the role of Jesus for us. I mean, they are our leader, they are our canonical leader. And so if they are positively talking about our school community, that can go a long way. And then I know we talked about alumni and bringing back those alumni and asking them what their favorite part was, or if there's alumni that now their parents, why did you choose to come back? And we had mentioned highlighting students, but maybe highlighting some families as well that have been part of this school for a really long time, and just getting their message out there about what makes our school so great. I think that can just go a really long way.
Those are all great ideas. I know one of the things I don't always think about it when I think about enrollment. Something that's important to our school communities are the celebrations. As Catholics, we love to celebrate. We celebrate everything, you know. We also love traditions, and there's some traditions that your school may have that you didn't even know they had until you went to the school, and they're when are we doing this? And you're like, I didn't even know we do that. And, you know, so there's things that are important to your families. So number one, you need to really know your families and what, you know, just knowing them, knowing everything about them is your job as an administrator. And also, I think it's very important, you know, to have system-wide planning on your school site. And the reason I say that is because we need succession plans. Teachers leave sometimes. Principals leave sometimes. They don't necessarily want to, but it's a fact. They do. They have to leave. And what we don't want is that teacher that always did this in third grade, and when they leave, so does everything great that they did at your school. You want to have things in place so when we lose great teachers, we also don't lose the great things they did at the school. So making sure that these great celebrations and traditions are built into your school culture so that they remain, and parents and everyone can start saying, oh, I'm going into fourth grade and we do. And you guys mentioned some of the great things you do at your school. And then also knowing what are those trends. Some of you mentioned after second grade, the kids would leave. Well, not all schools have that issue. Some have the issue they leave for kindergarten, as you said. At one of the schools I was at, they left at middle school because there was not a super close high school that was Catholic in our area. They had to travel a little bit further. And so some of the kids would then go off and to go to the public school. And they thought, well, I'll help my students acclimate. We'll leave now. And so knowing those things about your school. And so knowing that, we started really celebrating our middle school. And we realized that our middle schoolers felt like they were big kids that went to an elementary school. They didn't feel like they went to a middle school. So we put some things in motion that didn't cost a lot of money. A before-year barbecue just for middle schoolers. Dances just for middle schoolers, you know, safe ones that are on campus, and electives. We even put a quarterly rally in place just for middle schoolers. We suddenly had a full middle school. We did. It didn't take very long. We acknowledged them. They got special sweatshirts. They became leaders on campus, and we added a couple clubs that were only for middle schoolers. And so then they really had an identity, and that really helped bolster the excitement to be a middle schooler at our school. They even, at the end of got a passport to middle school, knowing where they were going to be, and the teachers, you know, celebrated they were going to be in middle school next year. And we did a lot of things like that. For our TK, we did a slide into kindergarten where the kids went down the slide, and at the bottom of the slide was their kindergarten teacher. So we were already welcoming them in on the last day. And it's really hard to tell your kid, yeah, but you're not going to be here next year. I knew you just, you know, so things like that just set them up for wanting to come back. And then the alumni, we bought pins, purchased little $2 pins, and invited our kids that graduated from 8th grade back after they graduated from high school to wear their school college sweatshirts and tell us what school they were going off to. They came and sat at Mass. Their parents came. I was surprised. They were so happy to be there. And we gave them a $2 pin that said our school alumni on it, you know, and it was great. It was such a great day. So these simple things, they don't have to cost a lot of money. They just have to be very intentional. All of these are great things you can do. Let's go ahead though and look at this slide here that we have up. It's just showing that, you know, as you can see, this yellow area down here in the southeast, as I think was already mentioned by Shauna, you know, families were moving. Families are moving. We see the west area and the east area, people are going to suburban and they're going to rural areas. And so, you know, we aren't necessarily changing the number of Catholic school students, but they're definitely moving to new areas. And so that presents challenges for our schools in those areas. And this slide right here just kind of reiterates that same thing. But one thing I noticed here is that 10% of our Catholic school students are now preschool students. So something to think about if you're looking to really bolster your enrollment. Do you have a preschool? Maybe you don't want to have one, but do you have a transitional kindergarten? And those are areas that you could start bringing families in earlier before they get attached to another school at that younger age. All right, so now, you know what to do. Scan that QR code and you could win. Again, we have a gift card coming from our friends at Community Brands, and they want to hear from you. And we want to hear from you. So if you have questions for us, please put them into the Q&A, and our panel is here to deliver answers for your questions. I see we have one here. This is our guest she is the liaison for 6 LaSallian higher education institutions. So we're looking at the high school level, and they're interested in experience with recruiting students at that level into the high school. Oh, actually higher education. I'm sorry. So we didn't talk about that yet today. If we're recruiting, they're recruiting from the high school to the colleges. Any thoughts there?
I would say it's a great question. At Community Brands, we are K-12 focused. So, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn or give anybody advice that I don't feel confident fully about, but I really hope you do get your question answered, and apologies that we couldn't jump in all over that.
I see that, Laura. Not Laura, Colette, can you clarify what your question is? Is your question around recruitment from our high schools into higher ed, or are you just here because you're interested in just hearing about the challenges that we face? Nice.
Just listening.
Same families. Same families.
Well,
Yes.
thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
Other questions we had is talking about what should our enrollment season, when should it start and when should it end? So if we're a new administrator and you're just coming in, what is that season?
I would say that season is all year. I mean, there is no real season. I mean, all of our schools face these, enrollment challenges, right? We just came back from a conference with the Association of Independent Schools, and they're facing the same challenges as our Catholic schools are facing. We're all facing the enrollment challenge because we're all going after the same applicants. So the year can start whenever someone is applying, right? We know traditionally a year starts somewhere in, August, September, and it's over somewhere March or April, but we are still filling seats in May. We're still filling seats in June. There were so many schools that I talked to over the past few days that are still filling seats right now and will probably work through the summer to get their seats filled. So I would say the season is all year long. Gone are the days that we have hundreds and hundreds of applicants, for our few 25 seats, right? We are working really hard as admission enrollment directors to fill those seats. And so the season takes as long as the season takes, and sometimes that's all year.
I know traditionally, a lot of times after that first of the year, after that Catholic Schools Week can be a really great kickoff week for starting that registration for the upcoming school year and getting kids excited for that upcoming school year. And the nice thing about starting it early in that end of winter time is that then you can look at your numbers for staffing. Because really with that registration and enrollment, we need to be looking at staffing numbers as well. And so what quite a few of the schools that I've worked with have done with is setting a cutoff date. Not that it's a hard cutoff date, but you can offer maybe some sort of like a lower registration fee then, or if you pay 10% by this point, you know, then you get some sort of a cut in your cost. So being creative with that so that you can have a high quality number that you can base your next year's staffing with, and even just ordering supplies and things like that. That it's really important that you have some sort of a soft deadline, but then, as Shanna was saying, really it never stops. I don't know there's not many schools that it ever truly 100% stops.
And whatever it is, make sure you post it. And if you're going to change it, make sure you get that information out early, because there's nothing like a great family wanting to come in that misses the deadline because you changed it this year versus last year. I think it's really important to communicate that in so many ways. You know, an article about your school in the newspaper, going to the even the preschool programs that don't have kindergarten, and going and presenting to them and letting them know what your times and dates are, making sure it's on the website, on your social media, even telling families at your school if they have friends in their neighborhood that they'd like to share, is sharing those dates and sharing them, and letting people know about when your open house is going to be during Catholic Schools Week, you know, and getting your families there. One of the simple things to do too is get all your families there. Because when you invite people into an empty school during maybe open house, and it's just a few students walking around that are prospective, they don't really get the sense for what your school is. Your school community is the families that go there. It is the students. So get them there in the uniforms. Give them a free dress pass for the next day. Get them there in uniforms. Let it be a celebration for your current families too. And it really helps the community get an idea of what your school looks like. And seeing the kids running around in their uniforms and performing and doing their little shows and showing their science experiments and really celebrating education that day really gives your new families a sense of what your school's like and who goes there. All right, and I see one more question, and it is, who are enrollment influencers? Great question.
Yeah, really terrific question. And it's everyone, right? We're talking about your current families, your faculty, you know, people in your community that are supporting your school mission, your alumni. I think, you know, in these particular types of roles, and now we've kind of heard that like enrollment season is all year long, yay, hooray. And it can be so overwhelming to be like, well, not only do I have to like fill, you know, like whatever the admissions quota is for that and your retention quota, but you're like, and now I have to wear a marketing hat. Now I have to do this thing. I have to do that thing. Well, the great news is that you already have a ton of people around you who are just as passionate about your school, your mission, your community, and your families. So utilize that, right? We want to work smarter, not harder. Tap into your alumni, tell them to talk about the school, you know, when they're out and about and doing the great things in the world that you've prepared them to do. Get in front of your parents, you know, support maybe like a luncheon for lunch and learn, and invite prospective parents in. Utilize those groups that are already around you and that are excited and passionate. Everyone is an influencer in my book, but I'm sure, you know, Shauna and Jennifer, you probably have some really great examples of that too.
No, I totally agree that everybody on your campus is an influencer and plays a part in the admission and enrollment of students at your schools, family, faculty, staff, students, alumni. Everybody is an influencer when it comes to enrollment. We would like to say that everybody's a part of the admission or enrollment office. So that means everybody has a role to play in enrolling new students and retaining current students. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and in addition, you know, that just thinking outside of who we haven't mentioned yet, just looking in the QRA, we have a DRE that is with us today, and Any parish staff certainly are going to be influencers, and parishioners. If your school is part of a area Catholic community or a local parish, when those parishioners love to see the students, and if they know that they belong to your school, it's amazing how, with those little old ladies, if they're out having some coffee, they're going to be talking about those cute little school kids and where they go to school. So those parishioners are also the influencers. I know we've mentioned social media quite a bit. So our students are themselves. If it's a little clip, why do you love going to this school? And having them give two quick bullet point answers, highlighting those kids. That's just another cost-effective, easy way that we can use the students that we already have.
And I encourage you to don't make assumptions when it comes to your school. Don't assume that people know about your school or know things about your school. We have to communicate. And in this day and age of overstimulation with all of the social media and all the communications that are out there, we're competing in that way too for just attention. So we have to be very clear and very intentional with what we say and how we say it, and be very short in our message and smart in what we say, and just making sure that we don't just assume people know who you are and what you're about, that you share that message and who you are. And remember that, yes, if everybody is an influencer, then our customer service has to be perfect, or we have to shoot for being perfect, because we know we can't make everyone happy, but even our unhappy parents are influencers about our school. So we have to do our best in that way too. No pressure though, no pressure. And speaking of pressure, I think that we've asked a lot of our panel today. I want to thank you, everyone that's here, for your time. Thank you to our panel, especially our friends at Education Solution by Community Brands. Thank you for your support. NCEA really appreciates and loves partnering with you. And thank you to all our guests. Thank you for attending this NCEA webinar. We strive to improve the quality of our services for our members and really appreciate your feedback. You will find in the chat box, there's a link there, and that link is our survey. If you include your email and name at the end of the survey, you will receive a certificate of completion to show that you've been here with us today. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye. God bless.